Welcome to HirePHD's ACPSS YouTube series. I'm Divya and I'm the project manager at HirePHD. I'm very excited to be the moderator for today's ACPSS episode. So today we have a very special guest with us, Nathan Michaels. Nathan, who is currently a senior manager of government affairs for Western Canada with Amgen. Previously, he served as a director of precision medicine and genetic services with the British Columbia Ministry of Health. Nathan is interested in and passionate about positive healthcare transformation, enabling data driven decision making to provide better outcomes for patients. Welcome again, Nathan. We are thrilled to have you as our guest today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Could you just start off by telling us about yourself and a little about your academic background and how this career journey of yours were mapped?
Sure. So, Nathan Michaels, I currently live in Victoria, British Columbia on the west coast of Canada. I did a Bachelor of Science majoring in general biology at Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops, which is in the interior of British Columbia. And then I did my PhD with Dr. Voon Wee Yong in neuroscience at the University of Calgary. And there we were mainly studying traumatic white matter injury and other types of white matter damage associated with traumatic brain injury, multiple sclerosis, stroke, that type of thing. Looking at the neuroinflammatory mechanisms of injury and then trying to find ways to ameliorate damage associated with injury and age. And ultimately, we repurposed a generic medication to help with some of the age-associated factors alongside secondary progressive multiple sclerosis.
So, since you have described your field of study and what you majored in, what prompted your decision to transition outside academia?
It was a journey for sure. I think the initial intent that I went into school with, as I think a lot of people who do an undergrad in science follow, is either academia or going into medicine or a combination of the two. And I was interested in doing a combination. I think the initial interest was focused on becoming a clinician researcher. I gravitated towards the University of Calgary for that reason because they do have a really good MD PhD program. So they kind of structure it so that you can apply to medical school while completing your graduate training, and then you can defer enrollment into medicine if you do get accepted while you complete your PhD. And so that was why I originally went to Calgary, and I also had an opportunity to work in a great lab there. But the transition from kind of focusing on that career path to ultimately deciding to do something different outside of academia, outside of the clinician researcher thing, it was just I got good exposure to working with clinician researchers, working with surgeons, working with people who were in academia and either at the postdoc level or at the assistant professor level. And ultimately it became a decision of understanding the lifestyle factors that I wanted. I've always kind of really valued my social life, the hobbies that I have, and I wasn't ready to give those kind of lifestyle factors up for a career in either as a clinician researcher or in academia. So I wanted more balance. That was something that at least at the training stages, that I saw my colleagues didn't necessarily have a whole lot of. So I knew what I didn't want to do more than what I wanted to do at that point. I loved science. I loved working in the lab. I loved being exposed to the different ideas and the excitement around that. But I also wanted a life outside of work and a little bit more balance. So that kind of spurred or initiated some thinking about looking into alternative paths outside of those two routes. And um, ultimately that was the driving factor that made me take the path that I'm currently on.
I'm sure you would have had a lot of challenges. So we would love
Mhm.
to know about that, the challenges you encountered during this transition process, because this is not what you had in mind when entering the graduate school.
Yeah, I think a lot of the challenges are associated with, of course, there's unknowns that you introduce, and that creates a lot of uncertainty, and so there's some anxious feelings around that. So you go from kind of having a nice plan, either it's medical school or graduate studies, followed by a postdoc, followed by trying to get a professorship somewhere as a PI. So once you kind of decide that that's not the route that you want to go, then all of a sudden there's a lot of uncertainty as okay, I don't know exactly what my next step is going to be. And so going from a very structured kind of knowing what the future might look like or knowing what you have to do to get to the next stage to then switching to a path where you don't know what the next step is going to look like, just it's a very kind of anxious time, and especially as you get closer and closer to graduation and not knowing exactly what the next step is going to be. I think that's the biggest challenge there. And um, just applying for jobs, not knowing exactly what your resume should look like, what skills that you do have, what fits in industry. Those were primarily the biggest challenges and the biggest hurdles to kind of overcome.
So, since you had all these challenges that you were facing at the time, what are some of the strategies or resources did you find helpful in navigating this transition?
Any outside help is always good. So things like HirePhD, the Career Center at the University of Calgary, I got in touch with them. They were able to kind of direct my attention in different ways. Strategies to overcome those kind of things, just persistence and get to work on applying for different jobs. I think the first one that you get out of grad school isn't necessarily the one that's not your dream job, and it doesn't have to be. But kind of getting your foot in the door somewhere definitely helps. I think if once you're in kind of a new job and in a new environment, that group doesn't necessarily know what you bring to the table and what skills you have. They know you're smart, they know you're capable because you've done a PhD, but they don't really know how all of those skills translate to what they're working on or what they're doing. So, but just getting your foot in the door, and then you have the opportunity to really show your skill set and what you're capable of. And then you also learn what translates and how to spin your skills so that they make sense in your new kind of area. So I didn't really mention that in the previous part, but a challenge when you first kind of get your foot in the door and you're first exposed to these new things is the terminology is definitely a little bit different. So in graduate school, you attain all of these abilities in project management, in portfolio management, in analysis, in managing people, but you don't necessarily have all of the words to understand that that's what that was at the time, because when you're in grad school, you're just working on a project, but you don't always see it that way. You're just, you're doing all these different meaningful conclusion, but you don't always know that, okay, this is where that's going to fit on my resume. So once you're in a new environment, it's you get exposed to how those different things all do. It's like, okay, we're working in an agile system now. It's like, okay, I've done that before a million times, but I didn't know that was like a specific thing that industry people like to see, and that I can then slot into my resume in that way. So strategies to kind of overcome all that. I think it's, yeah, you're just persistent, be very open about what you're able to do, kind of take the initiative to work on different areas that you think are helpful, show what you can do, and then it kind of does pay off. I think I've read this before, and my career path kind of exemplifies it as well. Coming out of grad school, you don't necessarily start at a higher level than maybe someone coming out with a master's or an undergrad, but you typically shoot up faster. So my career path kind of followed that same trajectory. I had an entry level ish job within government as a technical writer, but it was less than 6 months before I was promoted to manager. And then within a year and a half or 2 years, I was director. So the trajectory was fast once I was able to show how what I had done translated and kind of showed my abilities in a new area. But overcoming that challenge and being persistent enough to, and taking the risk and taking the initiative to show what you can do, kind of gets you over that hurdle of, okay, there's someone in our midst now with a PhD, super smart, super capable. We don't know how it translates, but you kind of have to, it's still the onus is on you to show how your skills translate. You can't expect a lot of people who are not familiar with the grad school pathway to necessarily understand what you do. It's still on you to be able to show what you're about.
So, since you have experienced the academic life, the life in the public sector, and also now a life in industry, what are some of the differences between these three that you have experienced?
Well, I think we can talk about similarities first. So
Sure.
similarity between academia, public sector life, and private sector life. I think there's always a high value on being able to bring something to a meaningful conclusion. So skills that have translated very, very well between the three different areas are being able to do your upfront research, publishing, working on a graduate school project and being able to get it published and get your thesis done. That path translates very well to public sector and private sector life. So doing your research up front, knowing the market that you're trying to get into, knowing what has been published in the area before, what work has been done in the area before, and then being able to carve out your niche, ask your questions, and then being able to bring them to a meaningful conclusion. That's the same across the board. And the work ethic that you develop through grad school definitely serves you well in public sector life and private sector life. And also the ability to collaborate. That is probably one of the most important things you can bring to the public sector or the private sector. And you learn all about that in graduate school, because tell me a paper that you haven't seen that have at least, 3 to 10 authors on them. So you have to be able to work with people, and that definitely translates well to the others. The differences that I've seen is, one, the terminology thing kind of shifts from one thing to the other.
Mm.
Acronyms are the same across the board, but the acronyms change. So in grad school, you're worried about protein related acronyms or gene names, versus in government, you have acronyms for different areas and what they do or different processes. Same thing with industry. So learning the different kind of languages that you have to know across the different areas takes a little bit to get used to. Differences in public sector versus private sector life. I think public sector, you're not always in control of the pace, and that's different from graduate school as well as private industry. In grad school, trying to get a project done, a lot of times you yourself are kind of the bottleneck. It's how many experiments you can get done and how fast you can collect data and analyze it. That's kind of the rate limiting step. Versus public sector life, you are kind of a little bit victim to the bureaucracy. So there are different areas that you have to work with all the time. So getting things approved and it having to go through 3 or 4 different levels, that's the rate limiting step. So you kind of adapt in a way where you have 4 or 5 different projects on the go so that you can always be busy and waiting for approvals to kind of come in from different places to keep things going. And I found in private sector life, things are more targeted to objectives that are relative to the quarter or to the year. So the pace is a little bit different, and it's a little bit more targeted in how you prioritize things in the 1 or 2 things that matter for the month or the quarter, and driving those to the results that you want. And I would say there's more data and metrics in the private industry because the infrastructure is a little bit better to track exactly what's going on all the time. So data-driven decision-making and data-driven performance is more, I've seen more of that in the private sector. So those are kind of subtle differences in just the way that the work flows, but it's different flavors of, I think, the same thing in all different areas.
Ah, that's great. So, since you have transitioned outside academia, were there any unexpected benefits or opportunities that arose from this transition that you were not expecting before?
I don't think I was expecting the skill set that I knew it would be valuable, but I didn't realize it would be so applicable to many different areas. So I had a really good opportunity with the Ministry of Health when I took on the Director of Precision Medicine job to start something completely fresh. So the previous director had left the position, and a lot of the staff in that area had left. So it was an opportunity to do something completely new and start kind of at the very beginning and develop the portfolio, develop the strategy, hire everyone that I wanted that I thought would be a good fit in the area. A lot of what I had, skills that I had acquired in grad school, translated to that much, much better than I had kind of anticipated. I hoped I would be able to do it well, but you don't really know until you do something. So that was kind of I wanted to do that because I wanted to challenge myself and see if I could pull it off. And there's a lot that translated over. So working in kind of an area of uncertainty or ambiguity, like you do in grad school, where you have a basic idea that you're starting from, a basic question, and then being able to develop that into in grad school, you're doing that to develop that into a project or a thesis or a publishable paper. But in that particular scenario with precision medicine, it was that simple idea of the right medicine for the right person at the right time. How do you develop that into a complete program? How do you develop a portfolio so that 6 different people can work under that umbrella and meet the strategy goals of the Ministry of Health, while also meeting those individual goals of the branch or the unit? So that definitely translated quite well. The framework that I was fortunate to work within grad school was, we were a very collaborative group. We involved as many different minds as possible, as early as possible. That's something that has served me well in public service as well as private industry. Is more minds are always better than one, to bounce ideas off of people, to get feedback, to prevent yourself from going down a rabbit hole, or always trying to make sure the work that you're doing has the maximum amount of impact for the amount of effort that you're putting in. So not spending 90% of your time for something that's going to help 20 people. So ensuring that what you're doing, the effort that you're putting in, has the potential to have as big of an impact as possible. And you need other minds, you need other people to help you kind of hone those ideas and ensure that you're on the right track. So those are a couple of things that I'm happy I developed, and based on feedback that I got from people when I was in the public service, that I was very collaborative. And to me, that was a surprise because that's just the way you do things, right? But to know from their perspective that, okay, that's not how everyone kind of functions in this area. So I think it's hugely beneficial to have that kind of that perspective on things and that approach. And it served me well, and I'm happy that it did.
Did you face any skepticism or resistance from either the academic peers or industry professionals regarding this transition?
It's not, I wouldn't say overt skepticism, but you definitely have less help, I think, just because the people that you're immediately surrounded by, like either your formal mentor and your supervisor or some of your peers who might be postdocs, they're kind of on a different career trajectory, or they had a different career trajectory. So they're very able to help people that want to follow a similar path. But of course, they know less about something that's kind of alternative because they didn't kind of walk that themselves. So you have a little less overt kind of support just because they lack some of the knowledge that that path kind of involves. In terms of kind of skepticism from industry or from outside of academia in the places that you're applying to, I think there's just at least there was at the time, a general lack of understanding of what you can bring to the table, which I kind of mentioned a little bit before, but they don't necessarily know how your skills are going to translate to you being able to do their job that according to their profile. So how does your in-depth knowledge of microglia and neuroinflammation really help us, transform the healthcare sector? It's, the proteins and inflammatory processes and stuff like that. They don't know how that translates, but it does. Because you're able to understand complex ideas, you're able to incorporate a lot of complex information into the central kind of space, and then you can deploy that in some way that's meaningful. So I think that's definitely a skepticism that you get outside of academia is how does this really benefit us? So that's kind of your job to show them exactly why this is going to benefit you.
Could you discuss the role of networking and professional relationships in facilitating this kind of transition outside academia?
Yeah, networking is great. It's huge. It's finding the right people to work with, I think is more important than maybe the job profile or exactly what you're going to be doing. At least that's been my personal experience. I've been very fortunate, I would say, to always work with really good groups of people that were really supportive and wanted you to be successful. I can say nothing but good things from the group that I worked with for my undergrad research job to graduate school. Like I mentioned, I had a really good supportive supervisor, and postdocs and anyone else always were more than willing to make connections if they had any type of idea of what I was kind of looking for. Always happy to make an introduction. So that's always been great. And I think finding the right people to work with is hugely important. So like I mentioned before, the granular parts of the job that you're applying for or what you're going to do, I think to me, with 2020 hindsight, I would put that secondary to just the group that you're working with. Are you going to have a supervisor or a boss that's going to let you work in a way that you tend to thrive? And your network definitely grows. I'm a person that I think it's valuable to be open, and that comes from first knowing exactly what you want, knowing what you value. And that can lead to some anxious times at the beginning where, like I said, you don't really know how that translates to what your career path is going to look like. But knowing that you want some balance in your life, knowing what aspects of a job you're looking for, staying true to that, being open to that with the people that you do network with, because then oftentimes you can be at an event that is completely unrelated to something that you're looking for, but you're just having a conversation. And if you're open about things, they can go, oh, hey, that actually is relevant to some of that I know, will make this connection. And sometimes that can be within the context of looking for the next job that you're interested in, versus it could be just valuable to you as being able to perform the functions of your current job. So I think it's always helpful to be open with people, know exactly what you want, know exactly what you're looking for, and not being shy to express those things and kind of communicate those things with people around you. And most of the jobs that I've got have been due to someone noticing something about me, and then kind of, you get a little bit of good faith and someone knows a little bit about you before you actually apply to something. So that always helps.
Is there any advice you wish you had received or any actions you would have taken differently which would have like eased your transition outside the academia?
Looking back, I think I would just tell, like, just trust myself and trusted the path that I was going down, that it was going to work out. I would say that to myself, and I would have saved myself a lot of stress and kind of a lot of anxiety associated with uncertainty. That know what you want, stick with what you want, and you're going to find a job that matches what you're looking for if you are actually honest with what you want. So I think I would tell that to myself in that phase of my life. I tell that to people that I've worked with in various places or who have asked me for advice. If you kind of change yourself to fit the mold of the job that you're applying for, and then you get that job, and then you notice there's an inconsistency with how they want you to act versus how you're acting, you can't really be that surprised about it if you kind of adapted yourself to fit that scenario. But if you kind of go through the process, being true to what you want and being kind of in tune with what you're looking for, maybe you'll get a few more rejections along the way. But ultimately, the job that you do get, I think, becomes a good fit because you're willing to be exactly who you are and express exactly what you're looking for. So that's what I would say to myself. And it does work out. You got a good skill set. Just be persistent, trust the process, and you'll end up somewhere where you weren't expecting to get to, but it ends up being a good fit.
Any final words for our audience who I'm sure are still struggling with transitioning and other stuff? Someone is struggling with resume, someone is struggling with the application process. So anything you want to say to our audience that would help them?
Stay persistent. I think go for quality over quantity. Less is more. Ask questions to the hiring managers. I think that's, having been on the hiring side of things now, I appreciate that. Do I think I think you have more success going for a few targeted things rather than kind of doing a resume blast and doing 5 or 6 different ones a day with kind of a generic submission to a bunch of different things. Do your research, know a little bit about where you're applying. Is that a good fit? Tailor your resume to it. Reach out to the hiring manager, ask questions if you need. Once you do get to the interview kind of stage of things, dedicate the time to knowing a little bit about the company or about the ministry if you are in public, or it serves kind of all different avenues. But focus over quality. Know what you want, know what the job is about, kind of dig into it a little bit, be able to ask good questions about the role, show that you dedicated some time into looking into it. And I think that does serve a little bit better. It can that comes to the persistent part and trusting that it's going to work out part. That does can be exhausting. It is a full-time job in itself, applying for things outside of a job that you already have. So the persistence helps. Utilize your networks. Tell everyone that is in your near circle, secondary circles. Get out there, go to events, tell people what you're about, tell people what you're interested in, and they'll be able to help you find your way. Use as many resources as you possibly can, like HirePhD, LinkedIn Learning, Harvard Business Review. All those things I found helpful to kind of understand the lingo of industry, understand what potential options that you have available to you. Try identify your areas of weakness, whether that's interviewing, or talk to your friends that maybe aren't within academia to try help them understand what you do at a level that they can understand, and be able to express that passion that you have about a very detailed area, but help people understand how that fits into a broader area. And that'll help you come interview time to be able to quickly translate. I can do something really complex, but I can talk at a level that doesn't make me seem foreign or alien. And I can present things to a wide variety of different audiences. Those are all kind of things that do definitely help.
I mean, you have made the transition from academia to public sector, now to an industrial sector. So we do appreciate all the wisdom you had to impart to our audience. Thank you so much, Nathan, for being a speaker today.
Yeah,
Thanks
my pleasure. Thank you.
HirePhD is a non-profit organization which aims to help advanced degree holders by providing them necessary resources for a successful career transition. ACPSS is short for Alternative Career Path Success Stories, which aims to expose our audience to the numerous career possibilities outside academia. ACPSS is one of the numerous initiatives by HirePhD to help advanced degree holders unlock their potential and navigate career paths. And for our audience, if you like today's episode and want to hear more about career journeys, please click like and subscribe down below. And we'll be back with more educational and informational content to help you with your career transition. Thank you so much.